Make-A-Wish employee. What was the strangest thing a kid asked for you had to say no to? My friend's an aquarist, and she told me about one 17-year-old patient who was seriously ill. He had a wish to smell a sea lion's breath before he died. He had read it was the worst thing ever, and was just curious to experience it for some reason. Plus, he likes sea lions, I guess. She was, of course, pretty shocked by the request and said, "Are you sure? I promise you really, really don't want to smell it. I always make sure to hold my breath if I'm getting that close." But he insisted, and it was arranged. He puked and didn't enjoy it very much. Commenter? I work at a zoo, but not with animals. Otters just happen to be my favorite animal. Another stinky animal, though. I was taking an animal training class to teach me how to train animals. Our sea lions used to kiss people on the cheek as part of a wild encounter. The decision was made to get rid of that part of the encounter. So they needed someone to sit there while the trainers reinforced. I know we asked you to kiss people before, but we aren't doing that anymore. Don't kiss. I was sitting side by side with someone else, about 3 foot from them. Xander was between us. Xander waved his head back and forth, deciding who to kiss. Next thing I knew, he had his nose targeted on my cheek. Story 2. A funeral. He knew his parents wouldn't be able to afford one, so he wished to have his funeral paid for. They were able to convince his to make another wish, and he wished for gold lockets for his mom and sister with his initials engraved on them. His funeral was paid for as well. I believe another nonprofit helped with that. They just really wanted him to have a wish for himself, but all he cared about was his family. Story 3. My friend's son won a spider costume. Not a Spider-Man costume, spider. It was the day before Halloween. A volunteer stayed up all night and made him the costume. Commenter? I did a medical sustainment course at Fort Drum in February a few years ago. This one particular day was medevac training. Our certification for loading patients into the Black Hawk coincided with the Black Hawk flight crew's training to receive patients. We would wait for it to land and get guidance from the crew chief, carry the patient, lifelike dummy strapped on the litter, up, and essentially move away. It was honestly a bit boring. Needless to say, it was freezing cold with feet of snow and ice on the ground. Standing there with the wind whipping at us from the blades of the helicopter was not very fun. We were all miserable, and in between iterations, we were just talking about things that would make us happier. I happened to mention that I've always wanted to fly in a helicopter. I guess the right person overheard, and the course instructor grabbed me and told me to limp up to the Black Hawk when it landed next. He told the flight crew that there's a frago and I'm a walking wounded who needed evac. It took me 5 years and 27 days of being in the military before I finally got to do one of the cool things my recruiter told me I would do. The ride lasted only about 3 minutes, but I've never in my life had the biggest and cheesiest smile on my face like I did during that flight. I understand that, kid. Story 4. I was a Black Hawk pilot in the Army, and we had a Make-A-Wish kid who wanted to fly in an Army helicopter. We had to remove all the seats so we could strap his wheelchair down in the middle of the helicopter, and we flew him around at treetop level, yanking and banking with the doors open for a while. Commenter. I've been the recipient, and later on after my health improved, I volunteered as a wish coordinator. My original wish was to attend the Oscars. That got denied by the Academy as they do not grant wishes. I wound up going to the People's Choice Awards as a VIP. Make-A-Wish flew my family to LA for a week, all expenses paid. They got us a limo for the show, paid for my dress, hair, and makeup. We walked the red carpet and were seated very close to the stage. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The generosity of the volunteers is remarkable. They even had someone greet us at the airport on arrival. It was extremely important to me that my brother and sister were included in my wish because my illness had robbed them of part of their childhood. I'm forever indebted to everyone who made my wish possible. When I turned 18, I decided to volunteer as a wish coordinator to give back to an organization that did so much for me. I met with wish kids and their families. We would always arrive with a gift for all the children in the family based on a little survey they filled out. We'd talk with the child and help define their wish. It's important to determine the child's true wish and make sure that it isn't influenced by parents. The most common wish is to go to Disney. Celebrity meets and greets are the ones that often can be turned down. First, because it is undefined what a meet and greet is. It could be the child literally waving at someone and no one wants that. And second, because not all celebrities grant wishes or can schedule time to meet wish kids. The coolest wish I worked on was a shopping spree for a boy who was confined to his room. He got $7K to go buy video games, TVs, a tricked-out lazy boy, etc. for the ultimate gaming setup. Story 5. My wife worked as a nurse at a children's hospital and cared for a 17-year-old patient who had an incurable disease. His wish was to meet Wiz Khalifa. He showed up and spent the day. My wife said they went on a walk and came back high as balls. She said it was a great day for the boy and his family. He passed away a few weeks later. Commenter. Just for some background, both my sister and I are pretty damn sick, and so we had the rare occasion where we both got wishes. My family suggested that we just do one, but Make-A-Wish was adamant that we each got our own. My sister's Make-A-Wish was to meet Taylor Swift. We flew to Nebraska for 2 days, got in the same meet and greet line as people who won radio contests, took a picture with Taylor Swift, and that was that. I, on the other hand, asked to meet Christopher Nolan. He had never been requested for a wish, so we were flown to LA where we got a tour of the Warner Brothers lot and then had a private lunch with Nolan and Emma Thomas, his wife. We hung out for 2 hours, where they finally left because they had some film-related thing to do. We found out later that he'd only agreed to an hour, but during the lunch insisted that he stayed longer. It was quite interesting how we both had celebrity wishes, and they both turned out so differently. Story 6. After I survived cancer at 17, I was offered a wish. I went to Christmas Island with my family to see the spawning of the red crabs, reckoned to be one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. Picture it, 1,000,000 fist-sized red land crabs making their way down to the sea edge to release their eggs into the ocean over a period of just 3 hours or so. The Make-A-Wish volunteers looked horrified as I explained it, and I'm typing this now, so yes, I live thanks. Come to think of it, I'm pretty sure my wish caught my family a bit off guard too. Commenter, I got a wish as a kid, then survived. The best thing I could think of was to go to Chuck E. Cheese's. I have no idea why I was fixated on that. To the credit of some good peeps, to Chuck E. Cheese's I went. I couldn't be around other people, so they opened it up at night. People deep cleaned it, sterilizing each ball and ball pit. There was dedication there. Then someone who was cleared medically worked it. Don't remember most of it, was pretty young, mostly just remember the bits I found exciting. But that damn rat casino still makes me smile whenever I see one. Morale of story. Never bet against Make-A-Wish when dealing with logistics. Every. Ball in pit. Story 7? My ex-GF was a Make-A-Wish kid, and she got to be a guest on Avatar, The Last Airbender. She was in the Tales of Basing, say, at the end of the tale of Aang. She's the kid that sees her cat in the zoo and says, "Fluffykins, what are you doing down there?" Also to add to this, her wish wasn't actually to be on the show, but to go to Orlando Studios to meet the cast and crew. While she was there, the show's creators offered to draw her into the show and gave her a line to say. So the character she voiced was even drawn to look like her. Even the hat she wears was similar to the one she wore at the time. Commenter, a classmate of mine, now passed, got a meet and greet with Sammy Sosa. The understanding from the Make-A-Wish people was that Sammy would sign autographs and sit with the family for a while. Now this kid was all about Sammy. He had his jerseys, loved Sammy's little leaps after home runs, and Ayerk even was big into Pepsi because of Sammy too. When the day came, Sammy showed up late. He didn't respond when the family greeted him. It was described as a sullen silence, signed a glove, and then walked away. My classmate started crying once it was clear Sammy was not going to come back. Right when the parents were about to leave, another baseball player named Corey Patterson saw my classmate, came up, signed everything they had, and talked and joked around with the family for over a half hour. Corey became my classmate's favorite player that day, and I think he lived perhaps a year after that moment. At his funeral, my classmate's picture with Corey was one of the prominent pictures. That moment and day truly meant the world to him. To this day, I'm unsure if someone from Make-A-Wish found Corey or if the moment was as spontaneous as it was described to me. But no matter what, Corey will always have a special place in my heart because of that story. Story 8. I used to know a dude who got sick in high school and his wish was to see Rocksteady Studios and be in one of their games. The studio was super cool, evidently, and they put him in Arkham Knight as a GCPD officer. Best part of the story is that he recovered and, last I heard, is still doing okay to this day. Commander. Glad to see that I am not the only one with this weird request. I was also eligible for Make-A-Wish when I started high school, and I asked to visit DICE at their HQ in Stockholm. I didn't ask to be in any of their games, though. Damn it, why didn't I think of that? I was passionate about game development, and I still am, and thus wanted to see what it's like to work in a AAA studio, and also ask about a bunch of game dev stuff. They constantly asked me, "Are you sure you wouldn't rather want to go to Disneyland?" I said, "This is my Disneyland." Guess they thought it was a weird request for a 15-year-old kid to make. This year, I finished my bachelor's degree in computer science, and in the future, I can hopefully land a job in game dev. Story 9. I was a Make-A-Wish kid back in 2017, and my wish was to go see a live brain surgery in Seattle at University of Washington. I loved Grey's Anatomy, I loved Dr. Shepard, and I had brain disease. So I wanted to see what my doctors kind of saw, what an experience, and learned so much. I was a little neurosurgeon for a day, and the neurosurgeon was playing the Pixies while operating. What a great, happy moment I won't forget. They even sent my family from Arizona to Seattle with me to have dinner with me in the Space Needle. Commenter. I have experience with Make-A-Wish in the last year due to my son's condition. This was a question I asked, and the response I was given was, they will do anything they can within reason. One kid wanted a swimming pool in his backyard, and they did that. Because of how the process goes with Make-A-Wish, they asked the kid a lot of questions to determine what the child wants and to ensure there isn't any influence from the parents. My wife and I sat with my son, while they asked him a lot of questions over about a 1 hour period to determine what he wanted to do. They asked my wife and I to sit there silently while he answered honestly. We're going to go to Legoland and meet Darth Vader sometime in 2019. Story 10. Local kid wasn't going to last till Christmas, but loved the Santa Claus parade. So his make-a-wish was to see it one last time. The neighboring community went all out, even with fake snow. By all accounts, the whole town came. We tried but couldn't get anywhere near. Story 11. When I was on a carrier, they flew a kid and his parents out. They routinely fly distinguished visitors, but we thought it was weird there was this kid. They got tours and watched flight ops, but he couldn't fly with us. So they asked us to have dinner with him so he could at least meet pilots and ask questions. It was really humbling when we realized this is what he was there for. He literally wished to just come see what we do and hang it with us. Story 12. I worked at a Lego retail store in the 2000s, and Make-A-Wish approached us for a child with terminal osteosarcoma who wanted to be in the store for a day. Lego unfortunately denied the request, which surprised myself and the rest of the staff because Lego was a pretty great company. Staff decided to honor the request ourselves. We closed the store early on a Sunday, then invited the kid and family in. He had a full run of the store. We collectively paid for like $1,000 worth of toys for him to take home and just spent the entire evening building WWE he wanted. He died a few months later. Story 13. I had a wish when I was 8 due to having leukemia and a bone marrow transplant. My first thought was, meet Bruce Willis. Die Hard was my newly discovered favorite film. But my dad asked if I wanted something that would last, like a computer. I always loved playing on the hospital computers, so went for that. Best decision ever? I might owe my career to it. I hear Bruce Willis is a bit of a tit IRL anyway. I think this was after the BMT, so I was past the worst of it. So I was most likely going to be around to enjoy the thing that will last. Story 14. I worked at a hospice and we had a wishing program. One of our patients, 24-year-old with brain disease, wanted to hold a sloth. Apparently, sloths are very nervous creatures, so it's a little tricky to actually hold one. I found a local company that does visits to schools and whatnot who had a sloth. Sloths only poop about once a week, and the sloth could only travel the day after he pooped because they get nervous any longer than that, and the sloth has stress diarrhea. So basically, we had to wait until the sloth pooped and then set up the visit for the next day. The sloth pooped on Thanksgiving, so we set up the visit for the next morning. The patient was able to hold and pet a very sweet sloth. The patient died about 3 weeks later, and I'm very happy I was able to help give her some joy in her final weeks. Story 15. Former employee here. Over half of the wishes are Disney-related, and beyond that, they typically fall into a few categories. I wish to travel. I wish to meet. I wish to be. I wish to have. I wish to give. You get the idea. So I always liked wishes that fell outside of the typical wish categories. One time, there was a boy that wished for the perfect baked potato. I don't know if the wish granters went through with that wish. They may have waited until he was a little older, but I still laugh when I think about it. Volunteers are trained to ensure they are determining the child's one true wish, not mom's wish to go on a cruise or dad's wish for new tools, etc. A lot of work and thought goes into fulfilling a child's wish. Story 16. Okay, this is more wholesome than anything, but a girl who was a grade above me had cancer in high school. She graduated and I joined the band my senior year to see this plaque with her name and face on it from Make-A-Wish. She used her wish to donate new instruments to the school's band as they were needing new ones. I still know her to this day, and she makes a ton of jokes about disease that it even freaked out her college roommates. She's one of the nicest people I've ever met. Story 17. I've waited on 2 kids who had just been at their wish. His was to go to Comic-Con. Easy enough. The other was to be in a Revolutionary War reenactment. Imagine this little 8-year-old in colonial garb chowing down on some spaghetti and meatballs. I guess the whole local war reenactment community came together and put one on for him specifically. Coolest kid in the world. I hope they both pulled through. Also, on a side note, Ma gives the family a credit card to pay for expenses. Story 18. Not Make-A-Wish. But my brother got terminal brain disease when he was 18. He was given 3 to 6 months to live. Back then, his only wish was to be an NFL player. But he was 5'8", all heart. He was just like Rudy in that Notre Dame football movie. He fought it for 6 years. Somewhere around his 22nd birthday, he and I were talking about having something worth living for. I told him it didn't matter what it was, but a vision for the future that he would fight for was important, and encouraged him to find something to give his life to. We went on a vacation soon after that, and because we were broke from medical bills and 4 years of battling disease as a family, this was a huge deal. We hadn't had a family vacation for a long time. A family friend put us up in their beach house and gave us some money to have a good time there. My brother came alive on the trip. It was so impactful to him that he came home and decided to start a nonprofit organization. He called it A Week Away. It was very similar to Make-A-Wish. Terminally sick patients apply and benefit from an all-expenses-paid vacation with their family or group of caregivers. That was a big deal to him to include the family because if you've ever gone through something like that, you know it's not just the patient who suffers and loses their freedom. It's everyone they are close to. He worked his ass off to start the organization. He formed it and began sending families to places like the Outer Banks and Ocean City and other East Coast beaches. A week before he died, he launched his first big, month-long fundraiser. He passed away knowing that he had raised enough to send like 10 families on respite weeks. It was like he was passing the baton off to others who could keep on fighting. The org is still going strong today. Story 19. I did a children's wish at 17, which is an equivalent charity. I initially asked for tickets to the Victoria's Secret fashion show / after party, while they found it humorous. I was asked to choose a backup. I went to the Galapagos in the end, so that was pretty sweet. Most people don't know anything is wrong with me just by looking, which can actually be frustrating sometimes. But on this trip, I was feeling great. The guides were amazing, and the animals were so incredible. I was particularly lucky to go scuba diving as well. As usually, you only get to do scuba diving or island exploration, not both. Some of the best dives of my life saw a hammerhead, played with sea lions. In the end, I am glad this was the wish I got. Story 20. My brother had serious illness when we were in high school. We all got to go to an ice skating rink in NYC and play hockey with some of the New York Rangers. He was a Flyers fan, but what can you do? This wasn't actually his wish, but it was set up by the Make-A-Wish Foundation for all the terminal kids at the hospital, I'm pretty sure. Story 21. There was a Make-A-Wish kid in a class I taught once, and their wish was to tour a pickle factory. Pickles were their all-time favorite food, and they wanted to see how the sausage was made, so to speak. Apparently, Vlasic rose to the occasion in a major way, and she had the time of her life. Story 22. His Make-A-Wish was to meet Elmo. For a 3-year-old, not that strange, I guess. Sent us to Sesame World in Philly. We get there, and they had no clue he was on a Make-A-Wish trip, but they were great, and he met Elmo. Story 23. My cousin died of cystic fibrosis complications when he was 13. His Make-A-Wish was to see eagles IRL, so they sent him to Alaska. In his final moments, he told his mom the eagles had come for him. Story 24. This wasn't Make-A-Wish, it was a local radio station, but I swear every single part of this is true. I probably still have the master tape. Around 25 years ago, in the mid-90s, in the town I lived in up in the far northwest of Scotland, there was a community radio station. We were trying to set up a local radio station, so we had a 6-week run using borrowed equipment from Moray Firth Radio to gauge popularity and interest. Now, the first program in the evening after the news was one run by a couple of high school kids. We'd get a few kids in, they'd record a few idents and stuff. We'd run the idents. Then at 5:05, their show would go up, tunes they liked, shout-outs to their friends, that kind of thing. They loved it. They had a blast. Just tremendous fun. Now, there was one wee guy who was a wheelchair user who wanted to do a program, but he couldn't get into the studio because it wasn't wheelchair accessible. It was up a long flight of stairs in the old nurses' accommodation in the local hospital, and there aren't many wheelchair user nurses, and certainly not in the 50s when the hospital was built. He couldn't even be carried up the stairs because he had severe spinal problems that meant that his back, chest, and internal organs were pretty squashed, and he had to be moved very carefully. He was one very sick wee boy, and there was no way he was getting up to the studio. He was totally out of luck on that one. No, he wasn't though, was he? Because it occurred to me he could tape his program with one of the portable recorders we had, Little Marantz high-speed cassette recorder, give me a track listing, and I'd cut it together, play it to him, and if he was happy, we'd play it out for him. He wouldn't get to do it live, but next best thing, eh? So we did. I dropped off the tape recorder, microphone, and so on, and a day or so later, I collected it from him with his running order track list and a stack of CDs. Perfect. He even sounded like he'd really bashed on his script and sounded pretty damn good. Copy the tape to 1/4, copy the tunes to 1/4, edit it down, and boom. Except he had a cold, a snuffly, snottery cold. Every sentence was punctuated with sneef, snirk, snumph, snotty noises. Also, cats absolutely love to play with all this brown ticker tape confetti you're flooding the bedroom, where my editing gear was, and there were dozens of them. 18 hours of cutting, sticking, redubbing, finding a bit of dead air, just the right tone to fill the gap, cutting, sticking. But when his program went to air, he sounded amazing. Story 25. Wasn't weird or anything, but one of my friends had leukemia in 8th grade, and her wish was to meet Adam Sandler. So she got to spend the day on set of The Longest Yard with him. Story 26. My partner's nephew had serious illness when he was younger. He asked the Make-A-Wish people for an Xbox. His dad and even the Make-A-Wish person were like, "Are you sure we could have the entire family go to Disney in America if you want?" And he's like, "Nah, I want an Xbox." Luckily and miraculously, he survived so we can laugh about it now. Commenter? Reading all these comments made me realize I never knew how many Make-A-Wish kids survive. I always assumed that was sort of their last hurrah. Really glad to know that isn't always the case. Story 27. I have incurable disease, but I'm an adult. I've been put in touch with a charity who helps out people in my position. Normally, it's not a make-a-wish type of thing. They just pay for a holiday or something. But I have told them that if I'm still here after COVID and if Bill Burr does another world tour, I'd like to meet him. They responded pretty positively, saying they'd see what they could do. Haha, I'm not holding my breath, but it would be pretty cool if it happened. I'm in Australia and currently can't just pop over to the USA because of pandemic, treatment, and regular life stuff. This is why I said, if Bill Burr does another world tour, he's been here before, so post-COVID there's a good chance he'll come again. When I could no longer work as a train driver, they for some reason don't want people with brain disease in charge of 1,000 people's lives, I had to semi-retire. Instead, I published my own children's book as a new career that I can pick up or put down easily, depending on how I'm going with treatment. Story 28. In Wizard 101, there's a quest with an NPC named Brandon, named after a Make-A-Wish kid who played the game, and his request was to design a side quest for the game. You meet Brandon and go help him clear out this dungeon with 2 really hard bosses. Was a lot of fun. At the end, to get a gem, you can socket that lets you summon Brandon into battle as a follower. Pretty cool. Not sure what ended up happening to Brandon, but it's really cool that thousands of PPL have gotten to enjoy being a part of his wish, TBH. Story 29. I used to be a wish granter, and one kid wished for his parents to become citizens. They were illegal, and it was a constant source of anxiety for the kid that they could be deported. Unfortunately, despite the name Ma can't grant everything, and they did try, got a lawyer and everything, but it wasn't possible. More than 50% of wishes are Disney, though. Story 30. Since Op wants wishes that were granted, my nephew got a family trip to Costa Rica for his wish. Zip lines, beaches, they had a blast. My nephew wasn't terminal. He needed brain surgery for seizures, and the stress of the surgery did a number on him mentally. Story 31. I'm the kid in this case. I didn't have cancer, but at the time, my heart was just not doing so well. So since I kind of qualified for Make-A-Wish, I was considering 2 options at the time: a dog, pet, friendly restaurant, or a camper. I decided to go with the camper, since I can't control my body temperature and overheat very easily, so I couldn't do tent camping. Now, I'm happily camping as I write this answer here. Story 32. I had a coworker at my student job in college who had leukemia as a child. He wished to be in the Iditarod, so they flew his family to Alaska, and he got to meet all the dogs and ride in a sled for a leg of the race. If I remember correctly, he also got a husky puppy. He was 20 when I met him. I was a couple of years older and graduated college and never saw him again. The leukemia came back and he died in 2016. I don't think he was much older than 25. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. I hope heaven is real just for you, Ben. Story 33. To be a merman. A boy mermaid. He got a tail and swam in the giant tank with other mermaids at the aquarium. To play football with the red team. No pro or college preference, just had to be red. USC made it happen. To be a cool kid. Got a limo ride to the mall. Red carpet entrance with cheering fans, signed autographs, shopping spree for clothes. To be Robin. Not Batman, he said he wasn't ready for that. Went on an epic adventure fighting crime with Batman. Story 34. I was a serious illness. So know quite a few people who went through the process. I went to Yellowstone to camp and see a wild buffalo. I also volunteered at my local wish granting foundation. One very young girl wanted to go on a hunting trip. They sent her and her dad to a hunting lodge where she ended up breaking the lodge record for the largest buck ever shot. She wanted the entire thing stuffed. To this day in her house, there is a massive deer, body and all, standing in the living room. Another kid really wanted to eat bugs because he was a really big fan of the Survivor shows. They had a chef come in and cook bugs from all around the world in various ways. He really enjoyed it. I also just want to say that a ton of kids want to go meet a WWE pro wrestler, and they're normally the kindest people. A lot of kids want to meet celebrities, and they only give them 5 minutes, but the wrestlers really try to make an experience. John Cena is great. Apparently, Robin Williams was also the best wish granter. He would take the family out to eat, pretend to be the genie, take the kids to stores and buy them things. And if he was in their town, he would try and visit. I never knew anyone personally that met him, but the president of the foundation said they very much mourned his loss because he was so terrific for so many of their kids and their families. Story 35. I'm a MAW volunteer. The volunteers get to do all the fun stuff, like meet with the families, get the kids excited about their wish. We send little gifts and stuff along the way, and then be there when the wish is granted. We don't have to do any of the boring admin stuff. I have a little girl right now whose original wish was a unicorn. 6YO with severe epilepsy, has like 15 seizures a day, and has been through like 10 surgeries already. She wasn't having any of that fake stuff, like a stuffed animal or a costume. She insisted for weeks on a unicorn. That one was hard to manage. She's getting a cat. Story 36. My cousin was a Make-A-Wish kid. He loved golf, like had a scholarship to go play college. He loved it so much. He got to meet and play a round of golf with Payne Stewart. Unfortunately, he died not too long after that. Story 37. I shot an internal promotional video for Make-A-Wish once. I got to read through a big book of wishes they had granted. Some of them were so extravagant and amazing. Family vacations, celebrity meetings. And then I saw a 3-year-old who wished for a banana split for breakfast, and that's what they gave him. No one was like, Io, wish higher. Story 38. I was approached by a similar organization who wanted to arrange a day for a kid to shadow a veterinarian. I'm just a small animal veterinarian with a small hospital, so I found it odd that I'd be approached. I said yes. Who TF would say no? And we picked a day and had our regular patients in the hospital, and the kid got to watch us do our thing for a day. We gave him a lab coat and a stethoscope and let him tag along and see x-rays and ultrasounds and watch surgeries. I brought my dog in so he could try the ultrasound on her. He seemed to enjoy it. It wasn't a terribly strange request, really. It just seems like my day-to-day isn't something anyone would consider their dream experience. Story 39. This one kid really wanted to meet his favorite comedian. For legal reasons, they can't say who was first or second pick because they declined. But it was super awkward having to ask him what his third favorite comedian was. He settled on Daniel Tosh. Story 40. Not strange, but I'm still blown away from Best Buy just straight up giving my wish kid a new laptop. They're given a card with money on it to spend. The laptop was free. They only charged her for small things like headphones and games. Stellar form, Best Buy. Story 41. I stayed at an Airbnb in rural Victoria, Australia, and they had this indoor halfpipe. My boyfriend at the time loved skateboarding, so we were very interested why this older couple had a skate ramp in their backyard in the middle of nowhere. Turns out their son had terminal illness, and that's what he wished for. He made a full recovery. Story 42. Wasn't exactly in the trenches, but as a bystander, I overheard "to go to prom and look as pretty as my big sister" was requested, and that had stuck with me for 15 years. A few years ago, she showed up on a local online news article, recognizing her accomplishments as prom queen with a scholarship to boot. Story 43. I was a chef at a fancy steakhouse in Jacksonville, Florida. One day, my proprietor came to me and said, "This is Stacy the new girl. She'll be training with you." I look over and it's this adorable little girl in bright pink chef coat. I babysat my little cousins at the time, so I was actually pretty used to entertaining 10-year-old girls at the time. So I showed her the ropes. We made all kinds of stuff that were on the surface kind of random: candied bacon, cornbread, prosciutto-wrapped Boursin cheese-stuffed asparagus, a sweet tea-brined pork chop, a sorrel garnish salad type thing, and some other cool garnishes. We were having fun. I then made a puree out of the cornbread, let her plate up the dish a few different ways to show how you can play with ingredients and height to showcase different parts of the dish. She had a blast. It was only at the end when the father came up to me in tears that I realized what was going on. In the moment, I was a little upset because nobody told me, but I realized after it was for the best. I probably would not have been as bright and vibrant with the lessons had I have known, but it was a fulfilling experience for sure. I hope their family is doing well. Story 44. I was a Make-A-Wish child in my province. I've had brain disease since 12 and still have it today. My wish initially going to meet the cast from Hawaii 5-0 at Hawaii, but then I ended up also wanting to get this MSI Aegis pre-built gaming PC. When I told them I wanted that, they said, "You sure?" Then I don't remember what happened, but it wasn't until I was 16 when I got my wish for a VR gaming setup, and I built my PC at Canada Computers right before the pandemic and the GPU shortage. Feels good, and as of now, my treatment is stable and I have only gone through radiotherapy 2 times. Only thing is, there isn't much space in my room, so having the base requirements for a VR play area is kind of sad. Hopefully I can get a bigger area though, because I like playing in VR since it's nice. Story 45. I helped host a visit to a planetarium by a kid whose wish was to go to the moon. The front office folks thought I could just give her a personal tour of the planetarium and show her some nice high-resolution visuals, but I thought she deserved better than that. I commissioned a jeweler friend and meteorite enthusiast to make a silver crescent moon necklace, which he graciously donated to the cause, and I donated a small lunar meteorite from my own collection. It was a gorgeous necklace, very much to the credit of my friend's artistry and generosity. We couldn't take her to the moon, so we gave it to her instead. She was thrilled, but later said her real highlight of the trip was the astronaut ice cream. Ah, kids. Story 46. IDK if anyone's posted it yet, but a weird one that is awesome was Jay Harmer. His Make-A-Wish was to meet his favorite YouTuber Nerdcubed. Granted, and they made hilarious YouTube videos until he passed a few months later. Absolute unit and damn of a sense of humor. I still go check his Twitter every now and again. Story 47. I didn't use my wish for 18 years because I have sickle cell anemia and that condition doesn't have a cure. I never knew what I wanted to do. I always knew it was a lot of power because I was a really self-aware kid. I ended up giving a few Nintendo Switches to the hematology ward in the hospital I spent so much time in. I never told anyone in real life about this because I think it's a pretty weird and personal wish. Commentaire. One of my students had terminal illness. He was too sick to travel, but wanted to send his family and friends somewhere, but Ma said no. He ended up using his wish to get TV carts and video games for the oncology ward since that was his favorite thing to do and they only had one. Now they have one per room. Sadly, he didn't make it, but he did get to see the results before he passed. Story 48. Not make a wish, but the amount of dogs my ex used to smuggle into hospital when she was a nurse was truly amazing. Just because a dying person would want to see their little furry friend one more time. They usually would pass within a day, having had cuddles with their little companion. Even those surrounded by family, it was as though they were just waiting to see old, hairy legs one more time before moving on. Story 49. Not an employee. I was a Make-A-Wish kid when I was 17. The cutoff is 18. And I wished to go get tattooed by this guy out in Rome. I figured they would say no, but they were cool with it, contacted the guy, who was super happy to oblige, and flew myself, my family, and my best friend at the time out to Rome for a week and paid for the tattoo. Coolest experience of my life so far. Story 50. Not an employee, but I got to do a wish. I went to the largest anime convention in the Netherlands by limousine, and they all thought I was some kind of special guest, Elmao. Story 51. My daughter was a Make-A-Wish kid. She asked to go to Australia to meet the Wiggles. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to travel that far. We live in the US, health-wise. She made a second wish, to meet Captain America. We never told Cap that he was a backup wish after the Wiggles were a no-go. Story 52. Not make a wish, but I got my wish from charity called Merlin's Magic Wand. I was very poorly as a young child to the point I was hospital a lot due to a non-tumor on the back of my head. I wanted to go to Legoland for years since I got my first Lego set. Well, they gave me and my family a day out to Legoland. We would never forget. Story 53. I'm not a Make-A-Wish employee, but a kid at my church a long time ago wished to sit in a bathtub full of peach-colored loofahs. The softball kind, obviously, not the hard sponge-like ones. He got it, and the church bulletin had a picture of this kid smiling like a maniac in a huge bathtub full of loofahs, so I guess he was happy with his wish. Story 54. One of my closest friends had a second bout of cancer in his mid-20s. It was his dream to join the military, but due to having disease in his teens and major spinal surgery related to it, he couldn't. He asked to meet Don Shipley, the guy who runs the civilian Navy SEAL camp in the South and also regularly calls out and tracks down phoned Navy SEALs. Don wasn't able to travel up to meet him, but Don called him, and then they had a great conversation. He told him, "I hope you beat this thing and then the beers are on me." Unfortunately, he didn't beat this bout of disease and passed away at home with his family. I and another friend took turns helping take care of him near the end and mostly just give him company in his last days. He had a hospice nurse as well. I miss him still. Love you, buddy. Rip. He had his friends, family, rockstar hospice nurses, and a morphine PCA to give him the most painless passing possible. Obligatory plea. I am an ICU nurse myself, and I mean it when I say I've seen a lot of people not be allowed to pass the way they should. Dying and death sucks. There's nothing meant to be, or God needed another angel about it. It is our responsibility to give our loved ones the best death possible. I call that a beautiful death, because I've seen ugly, needlessly painful, drawn-out ones. Story 55. My sister got a Make-A-Wish when she was 17. She has always wanted to be a vet and wanted to look behind the scenes at a zoo. Long story short, we got to pet the elephants and the rhinos. Surprisingly, they are very cuddly and like human contact. Story 56. A YouTuber Billiam used his wish to get a full kit of video equipment because he enjoyed being creative and wanted to have the technical ability to keep creating things. He still uses the equipment to create the videos for his YouTube channel, and later made a video about his experience with Ma. Story 57. My daughter had a genetic neuromuscular disease with an average life expectancy of 24 months. Most children with this disease are above average intelligence. This child was extremely intelligent. Most children are putting only 2 words together, but mine was saying 7, 9 word sentences. Make-A-Wish typically wants the child to be 3 years old because most children younger than 3 are not able to express their wish. She was 2.5 years old and able to tell them exactly what she wanted. She wanted to meet Barney and Baby Bop. Fortunately, they were owned by Disney, and we got to meet them at Give Kids the World. And it was great that we got to go to Disney because she also loved and got to meet all the princesses. She loved the parades and Animal Kingdom too. Another plus, my mother was in a short remission with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and was able to make the trip with us. My mom died 2 years after the trip. My daughter died 13 years after the trip. Yes, she lived to be 15 years old. Story 58. I have muscular dystrophy, and when I found out about Make-A-Wish, I wanted to do something as big as I could, so I wished for a vacation in London. They paid for a week-long vacation, and my family and I got to see a ton of tourist spots and to go a lot of museums, which are my favorite places to visit. It was an amazing experience, and whenever I see Make-A-Wish drives, I always donate if I can for such an amazing experience they gave me. Story 59. I'm a wish granter. My strangest personal wish was a refurbished 80s camper so that she could have her own space. She couldn't go out in public while her transplant was newish, and she was going crazy in the house with 2 younger siblings. It was actually pretty cool, although the strange part was that Ma can't actually use used things like that. So we had to get her a new VW camper or something like that, it's been a while, and artfully make it look vintage. So strange. Anyways, please feel free to apply to be a Make-A-Wish volunteer. It's such a rewarding experience, and even if you don't feel like you can work with the kids, there's also other volunteer positions like fundraising, event planning, and more. Story 60. I had leukemia 18 years ago, and I asked for a laptop. I think it was my first one. I was 16 and was top of the range at the time. My dad was basically guilted into paying for extended warranty by the store, saying they wouldn't be able to give the charity as good a deal, etc. if he didn't. About a month before the warranty ran out, I think it was either 3 or 5 years, I sent it off as one of the hinges had broken. They took too long to repair, so ended sending me something like £1,100 in vouchers to buy a replacement instead, so I bought another laptop, which lasted me for another good few years. So it was worth taking out the warranty after all. Story 61. When my sister was 5 and I was 8, she had terminal illness and had the opportunity to make a wish. When our mom and the Make-A-Wish person sat down with her, they told her she could wish for whatever she wanted. She just kept saying she wanted macaroni. They kept saying, but it can be anything you want. Yet, she simply wanted macaroni and cheese. After some strong encouragement to think bigger, and the Make-A-Wish person suggesting Disneyland, she chose to go to Disneyland. Story 62. Former Make-A-Wish employee here. Just wanted to clarify that the org grants wishes to kids with life-threatening medical conditions, not terminal. Many wish kids find the experience of receiving a wish to give them hope for the future, and make childhood memories that have nothing to do with their illness. In addition to my work with the org, I was a volunteer wish granter for 5+ years. I still keep in touch with some of the kids I met, who have now gone to college, gotten married, and in some cases had kids of their own. Wish-granting volunteers go in teams of 2 to meet with wish kids and listen to them describe their one true wish. They travel to the family's home or a public place, help with paperwork, and send the family off on their wish experience. It's the most time-intensive of the volunteer commitments, but extremely rewarding. Another former employee went into detail earlier in the thread. Story 63. There was a kid in the UK who asked to meet comedian Russell Howard. He told him about his funeral plans to have everyone dress up in costumes and wanted him to come in a giant pen costume. A few months later, the kid recovered, and Russell reached out to him, inviting him to his show on one condition. Story 64. Usually, the wishes we had to say no to were from the kid's family members. There was in every case some uncle, grandmother, cousin, kin, or parent who needed to seize the child's desire. Story 65. My friend, I'm 14, and my good buddy had all leukemia. He asked for a ride in a fighter jet, and he somehow got it. I was surprised because the doctors would say how his bones were getting fragile and weaker, and I guess I thought the G-force of the jet would hurt him, but he was fine and had a blast. He's doing better now and is scheduled out in about 3 months. Story 66. Hello? I don't have a story, but my family was granted a wish when I was 8 years old because of my terminally ill sister. We went to Disney World, of course. Pretty basic. But we are poor, and it's the only time anybody in my family has been. Story 67. I was granted a wish after beating brain disease in 2015. They flew my mom and I out to the capital city of our state, and we stayed in the flashiest, most expensive hotel suite with all the bells and whistles. We got free dinner, drinks, and dessert on arrival. Got to chill in the VIP lounge while we were waiting for our room. Our room was decorated with teddy bears and chocolates and maw decorations. The next day, we were chauffeured to the local mall in a limo, and I went on an 11-hour shopping spree with a preloaded Visa card and bought every solitary thing you would imagine a 16-year-old girl wanting. I ended up having to buy another suitcase to take everything home with me, but it was the most epic 3 days of my life. I'll never forget it. Story 68. There was that kid who wanted to work with the team designing D&D. He spent a day working with them on their next release book and helping design a monster. Ended up suggesting a monster that was designed into one of the coolest monsters in the book. Story 69. Not weird, but a funny experience. Through a similar organization supporting young adults with terminal illness, my best friend was offered tickets to One Direction. She accepted. The org had about 50 ticks, and she asked me to go. One Direction was right at the peak of popularity, but we both only knew one of their songs. We decided that we should really know a few more songs before we went, so trekked to a record shop in her wheelchair and asked the young guy for their album. Which one? Turned out they had released 3 records already. When we got to the concert, we thought the warm-up act was the real band. and were gobsmacked to see 5 guys in one direction, as we thought there were only 4. Apparently since then, 1 quit. When they sang a cover of Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus and the young girls in front of us announced, "This is their new song. It's so relevant," we knew we were far too old to be there. Also, as the concert was mostly 12, 17-year-olds, the bars were closed. It was a fab day regardless, and it always makes me smile when I remember it. Story 70. A friend of mine had cancer as a kid and wished for Play-Doh. They convinced him to change his wish to an Orlando trip, Disney World plus Universal Studios, where everyone in his family besides him got bird flu, so they were incapacitated the entire time. The Make-A-Wish representative and my friend had a blast, though getting to skip to the front of the line every time. Story 71. My GF got to go to Disneyland for her Make-A-Wish. She said they have their own facility for the Make-A-Wish kids. They get to skip all the lines, they get a new toy every day, eat all the ice cream and food they want, and basically they just spoil the kids as much as they possibly can. I cried when she told me about that. Story 72. I went to high school with someone whose youngest brother had some rare terminal disease and he was at the end of it. This kid was 10 and the thing he's wanted to do since he was 5 was to be a train conductor and take trains all around the world. With the help of Make-A-Wish and Dome Others, he was able to go and be a conductor for 6 of his last 8 months of life, and he traveled all over the US. He seemed like he had so much fun. Story 73. My husband was a Make-A-Wish kid. He had serious disease and a high probability of surviving. Spoiler, he did. He was 17 and from a nice enough family that if he wanted to do anything, they'd do it. So he used his wish to get new toys for the pediatric floor for a few hospitals in town and have other bedridden kids get Build-A-Bears. Story 74. Not an employee, but my college sorority's philanthropy was Make-A-Wish. We raised money and got to choose which wishes we wanted to grant. Usually, we'd be able to grant a wish each semester. I don't think we saw anything too crazy, but we sent a 4-year-old to watch the World Cup and paid for a 17-year-old's college tuition. We did have one young girl who really wanted a shopping spree at the mall near us that was pretty ghetto run down, but her parents convinced her to ask for a cruise instead. Story 75. A wish child and wish granter here. Strangest wish I heard from a fellow granter was the child wanted to visit his dad in prison. That's all he wanted and wouldn't be talked out of it. She offered to make the drive fancy at least. BC, it was 2 hours away, with a limo or fun car ride. He declined. His wish to simply see his imprisoned dad was granted, plain and simple. The wishes I granted were pretty traditional. Disney or other vacations. My weirdest wish was more sad. It was for a family of a girl who was completely immobile and very low cognitive ability. The house was run down and reeked of weed. The home nurse was literally crying while holding the child. Her sibling said she wanted a pool. I was fuming. We talked with the mom, who wouldn't leave her own bed for unknown reasons. Bong on nightstand. And she agreed a pool wasn't the best idea. Nurse recommended a chair the child could sit in that would rock and calm her. Wish granted. My wish was Disney. Had a heart transplant in 1999. I'm fine now. About 60% of all wishes are Disney, and totally worth it. My family took me again on my 20-year heartiversary, and I'll never forget it. Story 76. I had the privilege of working for Make-A-Wish, MAW, at their national office for a number of years. Here are a few of my favorites, as best as I can remember them. 1. I wished to be a worker in a pickle factory. Turns out that during his chemotherapy, the child's favorite food became pickles and was one of the few things he could manage to enjoy, so he wanted to meet the people who put the pickles in jars. The organization made it into a big deal, and you bet those pickle factory workers were thrilled to experience his joy that day. There was a photo in the office of this little boy in a hairnet with a beaming smile as he watched pickle spears move by on a conveyor belt. Melts my heart. 2. I wish to have the experience of a Wii U fighter pilot who crashed on a deserted island. During some of his hospital stays, this wish kid had visits from a few veterans who told visit the hospital and tell him stories of their experiences. He became really interested in military history. Ma worked with a big contingent of people from Hawaii, including the US military, flew him to a little uninhabited island in Hawaii, and he got to experience, with his dad and a few safety experts, what it was like to be deserted for about 48 hours. 3. I wish to have a pet dragon. This was a tough one. Out of Idaho, I believe, to make happen, but this child wanted a pet dragon he could train. So the volunteers started thinking about how they could make this happen and stumbled across someone who had some experience in this kind of thing, the creator of the Furby. Ma set up a meeting between the two to help design it, and the Wish Kid was able to eventually get a little mechanical, very lifelike, think toothless dragon he could train. 4. I wish to be a national park ranger. This wish was featured on CBS Sunday Morning. This Wish Kid loved the outdoors, and national parks had played an important role in how his mom had met some important people in her life. He spent a few days learning the ropes of being a ranger at Yosemite National Park, and was even named an honorary park ranger. What I love the most about Ma is when volunteers first sit down with kids. They literally learn about what interests this child, what makes them tick. They ask them, If you could wish for anything, what would it be? This process gives them the opportunity to think about all the possibilities. Some kids have very specific requests. Others simply want to go to Disney World. But ultimately, this wish is so individualized that it is the perfect wish for that child. And there are a ton of benefits to the child and the family. It's a great organization. Also, feel free to ask me any questions. Story 77. A friend of mine is a K-9 police officer. He helped Make-A-Wish grant a wish to a set of twins with the deadliest form of cystic fibrosis. Most of the time, kids with CF aren't allowed to be around others with it because of cross-infecting bacteria. Them being twins shortens their life expectancy even more. Well, these 10-year-old boys wanted to meet a police dog. My friend and some of his buddies upped the wish, and during their meeting of his dog, they got called to help solve 3 crimes in their town. They pulled over a hijacker, found and arrested a robber, and helped find a missing 6-year-old, my friend's nephew. The town police department gave them certificates and honorary police badges for their work. Around 200 people showed up to where they got their awards to cheer them on. At their 11th birthday, they gave my friend a plaque they made with their dad thanking him for the best day ever. Story 78. Really not all that wild, but my friend used to work at Disney World as face characters that rhyme with Cinderella and Rapunzel. Yes, she is exceptionally beautiful. And they would get a heads up before greeting a Make-A-Wish kid so they could prepare for it emotionally, and then pause the line for a few minutes if they needed to compose themselves afterwards before seeing another kid. Disney is for sure a corrupt corporation, but at least they had that baseline level of decency for their workers. Story 79. Years ago, I was a meeting planner for a large bank. We had planned an incentive trip for our top brokers on a Disney cruise. It turns out there was a group of about 10 Make-A-Wish kids and their families on board. One of the brokers went up on stage during a meeting and said to the others, "Let's really make these kids' lives better," and had them all chip in. If I recall, they gave each family about $1,000. Story 80. I had serious disease when I was very young, and I was able to get a Make-Wish. Without hesitation, I said I wished I could eat Butterfingers with Mulan. It was my favorite candy and my favorite Disney character at the time, so it made sense to me. But they didn't really know what to do, so they just sent me off to Disney World. Every time I go to Disney, I always bring Butterfingers with me, and I always try to find Mulan in hopes my wish can come true. Maybe one day. Story 81. I had a friend in high school who died of muscular dystrophy. His Make-A-Wish to go to some famous science lab and talk to the scientists. He was urged to pick Disneyland instead, but he said he was too smart for that. Story 82. Not a Make-A-Wish employee, but my youngest cousin had terminal illness at age 2. She had the chance to make a wish. Want to know what her initial wish was? A toothbrush with Elsa's face from Frozen. Eventually, she changed her mind and got a 1-week trip to Japan instead. Story 83. I didn't grant one, but I did crush a dream. I was asked to take one out sailing on my yacht. My yacht, specifically. My yacht was being dry docked for 12-month refit and just wasn't seaworthy at the time. I had talked about it with the specialist, and we would have been a floating disaster waiting to happen if we went. Still feel bad about it. Story 84. Not a Make-A-Wish employee, but a kid in 2012, I think, asked to have his own skin in League of Legends for his favorite champion, Jax. They named the skin Jaximus. The kid died soon after, but to honor the kid, one of the skin's emotes is Jax saying the words, "Here's to you, kid." Story 85. When I was super sick, I wanted to meet Alf. Google him, young people. But apparently Alf was busy at the time or something. Instead, I was flown out to LA and got to go from sitcom to sitcom meeting the casts and watching episodes being filmed. Ended up being an amazing trip. Story 86. This one is going to get buried since it's too late, but my wife used to work at Disneyland playing Cruella. One day, her manager came by while she was getting ready for the day to tell her that she was going to do a private audience for a child from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Now my wife was absolutely shocked. She had worked there for years and seen the princesses and Minnie Mickey Mouse do hundreds of Make-A-Wishes, while the villains had never done a single one. She thought today was her lucky day, and she was going to be making a wish for the rare Cruella superfan. This was years ago, before Cruella had her own movie and was popular. Next, my wife enters the private audience room, which she hadn't even been in before, and puts on her Cruella attitude. Before she knows it, she sees this diminutive teenage child being wheeled over who is pointing her finger and yelling. As the child is wheeled closer, my wife hears the child yelling, "You're a creep!" over and over again. She tried to play it off, saying all the standard Cruella lines and making jokes, but the kid just kept screaming, "You're a creep!" while the family laughed and took photos. Now the kid wasn't 100% there mentally, so my wife didn't take it that hard, but it was pretty hilarious and confusing for my wife. Story 87. My brother has NEEF1, which is a condition that causes large, non-cancerous tumors to grow over major nerves. And my brother had a 1 in his armpit that threatened to cause him to lose control over that arm forever. As a result, my mom asked a maw person if he qualified for one, And he did. He played around with the idea of going to Harry Potter World in Universal Studios, Florida, but ended up deciding on a week-long trip to Japan instead. We ended up staying at a high-end hotel in the middle of Tokyo. Went to Japanese Disney World, which was, coincidentally, my first experience at a Disney park. Traveled to Kyoto to get the best street food I've ever tasted. Hiked up a mountain that was teeming with monkeys. I also caught diarrhea there due to some dubious water, but other than that it was great, and went on a Tokyo-wide tour that began in a second hotel, which was probably the single fanciest place I'll ever go to. The damn bathroom stalls were placed on the opposite side of a ducking bridge over an artificial river, to give you an idea of just how fancy this place was. It was an experience I'll never forget. Oh, and we got to ride in a limo to and from the airport. Story 88. In Orlando, there's a place called Give Kids the World Village that was started by a Holocaust survivor who learned about a kid whose wish was to go to Disney. But the kid died before all the arrangements could be made. He swore that would never happen again and opened this volunteer-run village that has housing, food, there's even a 24/7 ice cream parlor, handicap-accessible rides, an arcade, movie theater. You name it, and they've got it. They provide the transportation to and from all of the different parks, Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, etc. As well, it's really amazing. Before I started volunteering, I thought that going to Disney was kind of lame to choose as a wish. I was young. Then I realized just how amazing it is for these kids to get to do this with their entire family. A lot of families shared that their kids enjoyed being at the village more than the parks themselves. Story 89. My friend was a little kid when he had serious disease and made a wish for a DDR machine. He got one, survived his cancer, figured out how to download and load other DDR games, mixes, onto the machine. At one point was running a small underground business in high school charging kids to come over and play DDR in his garage. I got to play for free for being his friend. I got really good one summer from all that free playtime. In our 30s now, and he still has the machine, but I think it's mainly collecting dust now. Story 90. A friend of mine had terminal illness as a child. Her request to make a wish was for her whole family to go to Hawaii. Someone told her to hold off going then, so she did. She recovered from disease, and about 10 years later, they flew her entire family on an all-expense trip to Hawaii. This isn't an unusual request by any means, but I really appreciate that she was able to enjoy her request while not sick. Story 91. Former cancer kid here. I wanted to go to Italy or get a moped. I was 12 and not terminal, and neither one of those were going to be possible, so they just sent me to a bunch of different hockey events. Box seats, meeting players, free food, and they gave me a bunch of baseball stuff. Apparently should have just asked for an Xbox. Story 92. Pick 1/4 scale Fenway Park width, and the Red Sox donated their authentic Fenway grass from the park. 50 green monster with a wheelchair ramp, nighttime lighting, bleachers, underground sprinklers. Story 93. A 6-year-old leukemia survivor in Austin got to blow up a freeway flyover thanks to Make-A-Wish. He's a lucky little git. We all hated the 183 Floiver from 35. Story 94. Not a Make-A-Wish employee, but I had a friend who was on the list whose request was to be in a Tarantino film. Tarantino said no, because he wasn't filming anything at the time. Story 95. A friend's son wanted a chainsaw as his Make-A-Wish. He was 10 or 11 at the time. They ended up asking if he wanted anything else, and he decided he wanted an ATV to get around their property. Story 96. Around 30 years ago, my late cousin wished to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was probably 10 years old. There's a home video of Arnold offering a high five, and my cousin slapped it down, hard. Now my cousin wasn't as strong as other boys his age. And Arnie is, of course, a well-built man. So when Arnie pulled his hand back with feigned surprise and a show of hurt, it made everyone laugh. It was a special experience. Story 97. I remember there was a kid who was a World of Warcraft fan and went to Blizzard Studios. There is a quest still in the game that he designed and voiced. The kid died not long after, sadly. That was over 10 years ago. Story 98. The founder of Make-A-Wish lived and recently died in my town. There was a massive benefit, and people came from all over the world. Many people shared their wish stories, and it was one of the most profoundly touching experiences I've had in my life. I really wish he could be reading all of these. For anyone curious, Frank Shankwitz is his name, and he passed away in January of this year. In 2019, Wishman, the story of his life was released, and it's an incredible film. Story 99. I spent a good hour reading all these posts, and they made me so happy. I honestly never knew I could volunteer for Make-A-Wish, but I just signed up on their website. Thank you for all that you do.